Jordan from Wednesday Night Warhammer. I'm hanging with my buddy Charlie.
Yes, hello.
And Charlie had some great success at Crucible just like a couple of weeks ago with
Mhm.
Imperial agents, which is very exciting.
Yes, very exciting. Lots of fun.
If you're in Florida, go to Crucible. It is such a
Yeah,
good event, and Lewis, the guy running it, he does a great job at any event he's around. So we want to plug them a little bit before Charlie starts talking
yes.
about how incredible he did.
Yeah, and even if you're not from Florida, the venue is great. It's my favorite event every year. I've been every year for the past like 8 years or so. It's a
Wow,
really a wonderful time.
amazing. Let's talk about your list, man.
Yeah, so I came into this with Imperialis fleet. Obviously, I think genuinely it is probably the only real competitive viable detachment. Um, some of the stratagems are really good. It buffs the whole army, whereas some of the other detachments kind of narrow what can receive the buffs. And then so my thought process for building the list is the army kind of functions on characters, but I didn't want to have too many characters.
Right.
So my goal was to keep the number of characters I had on my list for points under 800, which I believe I was able to keep for this list. I believe, or maybe it was just over 800. But I kept the number pretty low, which I was happy about. And, as far as having 9 characters in the list
Right.
will go,
Yeah, yeah.
you
Like
know,
if you look at the
um,
left side of the slide.
yeah, it's most of my units. Yeah. Um, so yeah, the Canis Rex was a not like a snap decision. I don't think he's mandatory like a lot of people would think that he is for this army to function. I chose him specifically for Crucible because the terrain, every other table was a different layout between layouts 1 and 6. So you had either layout 1 or layout 6. And when I was prepping for the event, every game I played on layout 6 without Canis felt real bad when my opponent would just like put a unit on an objective in the open, and I would like not be able to interact with it because I didn't have any other guns that would do enough damage or like threaten enough damage to actually remove them from just
Right.
sitting in the open. So like my opponent could like throw a rhino on the center objective and I'd be like, I have to like send out something real to go kill this empty rhino, and that's bad.
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
so Canis Rex made it into the list. And then aside from that, it's a lot of like scoring trash and things that are a lot more difficult to deal with than you think they are. And then um the Death Watch kill team with the Watchmaster is a bit of a hammer unit. They hit really hard. The assassins, obviously, you can swap them out at the table. So I put the Calexis and the Vindicare on my list because I think people kind of regard them as the worst of the four. And so I thought, if I'm taking agents, I might as well commit to the meme and put the, quote unquote worst ones in the list and then just change them out every game.
Oh, so
Um,
and you actually did that?
Yes, and I actually did that. Yeah,
Wow.
I did end up choosing the Calexis in 3 of my 7 games, but the Calidus made it into every single one of my games. The
Right.
Vindicare, I painted one and brought one, but I probably could have not, and I would have been just just fine without him.
He's pretty
Um,
cute though, just being able to pop a
he is,
character from
he is pretty cute, and I like his application in theory. The problem is your opponent can just like not stand where he can see him, and then it's
right.
like, oh, cool. Glad I have this guy around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so it's a lot of like units being more difficult to deal with than they should because your opponent looks at the army. It's like, okay, you've got like 3 different flavors of guardsmen here, and then some space marines.
Right.
But then they start like popping smoke and reactive moving 6 inches, and they all have a 4-up inbone, and then guys are resurrecting, and it's like, whoa, what's
Yeah.
what's what's happening? And the subductors are just like guardsmen with a 4-up inbone and a 3-up armor save, and it's like, well, I charged them with something, and you still have like 4 dudes left, and then they still have the objective because now they're OC2 because the Imperialis fleet rule. So there was a lot of that happening this weekend. The list actually functioned really well. There's like random OC all over the place in the list. There's a lot of random battle shock mechanics that are actually really significant in a lot of matchups. And the Navy Breachers, their datasheet ability is really good. So like throwing an Inquisitor, Draxus, and the Rogue Trader entourage in each of those 3 squads just kind of makes some of the damage they can do kind of insane.
Yeah.
Draxus was a huge damage dealing like single unit in most of my games. Like walking out and picking up whole squads of whatever it is that but yeah, it's the list functioned really well. I was very, very happy that the application of it worked as well as I had designed it to. But and I didn't actually get to play any practice games with Canis in the list before going to Crucible. So it was a bit of a, in my mind, risky decision whether or not it would work out with him in
Right.
there.
But he is just so good, so it was
He
like
is. He genuinely, yeah.
definitely adjust your play style a little bit, but I mean he's just a solid unit. But that's
Absolutely.
great. That's awesome. That's some really cool points. Let's head into your first round that you played here.
Yes. Okay. So round 1, pretty unlucky round 1 in terms of matchup pull. I want to say my opponent was great. I'm in a guard Discord, or not Discord, messenger group. And I was talking to some of the guys in there, and one of them mentioned, "Oh, hey, I'm going to be at this event, this weekend at Crucible." And I was like, "Oh, no way! I'll see you there. Maybe we can meet and whatever." And then who do I pair into round 1, except for the guy that I was talking to the night before? So,
that's
out of
that's
100,
that's one of the things that I love about Warhammer. It
yeah,
really is such a small world.
it is absolutely, and it was a really fun game. He was a very good opponent. Um, But when I was prepping for the event, one of the things that I was like, okay, this is one of my like super wanna dodge matchups is 18 Bulgrin with guard.
Yeah.
Um, and then pulling it round 1, which round 1 the mission was my worst mission, purge the foe, and I got put on layout 6, which is the layout I didn't want. The
Yep.
list was kind of designed to function better on layout 1. So, I ended up eating kind of 3 out of 3 bad draws on things that outside of my control, but I played my heart out and I got like 50 something points, I think, but I don't think there are many meaningful decisions I could have made to change the game because my opponent played very well, and I just had a lot of things stacked up against me as far as the mission, the terrain, all that
Right.
stuff.
So was his pattern of play basically he just put Bulgrins on objectives and you couldn't remove them,
Yeah,
and he would just
yeah,
remove everything that you brought out?
basically that's exactly what happened. He got the first turn here, which is huge.
Yeah.
In Purge the Foe, there's not really much advantage, or I don't want to say not much advantage. There's not as much advantage to going second in Purge the Foe. And especially for me playing Imperial agents, there was no advantage in going second, because I knew I wasn't going to be killing more than him every turn.
Right.
Just because, I'm looking at 18 Bulgrins and 3 tanks, and then all stuff was kind of hiding. And then I have a bunch of small units running around the table. So he went first, put move, move, move on all 3 of his Bulgrin squads, and advanced them onto all 3 of the No Man's Land objectives.
Oh no.
Yeah, so I started my turn 1 by like, okay, to deal with 18 Bulgrin right now. And so I came out and I picked up 9 of them. So I got through
Wow.
half the Bulgrin on turn 1, but that took my entire army. And then in retaliation, he kind of just picked up too much for me to continue trying to chew through his army. And I kind of just ran out of resources and lost the trading game. And purge the foe is purge the foe. So I'm losing more units than him because I'm spending all my turns to fight the Bulgrin and
Right.
not removing multiple units.
And your army, correct me if I'm wrong, but your army wants to be okay with losing specific units, and
Yes.
you want
Yep.
to initiate trade wars and then do efficient trade wars in your favor, but
Correct.
Purge the Foe just kind of eats that up. And And I'm
Yeah,
speaking from
exactly.
strong experience because Tyranids
Yes.
want to function the same way, and Purge the Foe just eats it up. But hey, at least you're not spawning spore mines every single turn.
Yeah, true, true.
Okay, so round one was basically the worst case scenario. And
Yes, round one was literally the worst case scenario.
yeah, okay, so let's move away from round one and let's head on
Yes.
into round two. Black Templars, Gladius, you got the win.
Yes. I
Talk us
did.
through kind of like how you set up in like each turn, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So not only did I get the win, but I scored 100 points this game.
Sheesh.
Um yeah, so and I got to play one of my good friends as well, Mayhew Bunting, round 2. So it was fun to go from a disappointing loss to get to play someone that I know and am comfortable with. So we had just a very fun game. Um, and I got to play on layout 1, and spoiler alert, this is the only time I got to play it on layout 1 for the entire event.
That is
So
insane, man.
yes, yeah, I pulled layout 6 on 6 out of 7 games. I was a little unlucky, but it is what it is. So his list was pretty standard as far as Black Templar, Gladius, Sword Brethren, and Impulsors, a Crusader, some Gladiator tanks for shooting support. The Emperor's Champion. He didn't have Helbrecht, but he did have the Honor Vehement Captain. So lots of damage potential. Melee pretty quick with the advance and charge, the transports, making it hard with multiple layers of units you have to chew through, and then he had
Right.
like scouts and inceptors for
Mission play stuff.
mission play. Exactly. So I got to go second this game, which was huge. This is
Yeah.
also one of the only times that I got to go second for the rest of the event. I think I went first in 4 out of 5 of my next games, which was pretty tough towards the back end of the event, but we'll get to that later. So I went second. He moved up, shuffled some things forward, staged the Impulsor a little bit, shifted his Land Raider around into a position. I think he picked up a unit of Subductors that I had infiltrated, or at least no, he didn't pick them up until turn 2. But he kind of started staging, shifting his units around, getting the Eradicator brick up to somewhere where they might want to shoot it. So he pulled his Eradicator brick over onto the L ruin on the right side to be able to like move out and shoot something. So I had Canis kind of up towards the top end of my L ruin, and I pushed Canis out of range. So I was like, you know what? You're never gonna go and get there. I never want those Eradicators to be able to shoot at Canis Rex. This is the worst case scenario. So Canis Rex is going to go to the other side of the table and do something else. So Canis took some pot shots at an Impulsor turn 1 and did like 4 damage to it. And then I kind of, just staged some other stuff. Artemis went and stood on the center objective to start the, slow trade of resources. And this is where I think he made a mistake in like his calculation for how long it would take him to kill my stuff and how quickly I could kill him in return.
Right.
He sent in just the Impulsor with 5 Sword Brethren with the Emperor's Champion and nothing else on turn 2. So he kind of like shuffled around with the Redeemer and some other stuff to pick up a unit of Subductors that I had left, kind of ready to move block them. And because I had kind of wrapped most of my important stuff, the Sword Brethren that disembarked and charged me only got to hit Subductors.
Right. Yeah.
And funny story, 5 Sword Brethren with an Emperor's Champion don't even pick up a whole squad of Subductors on the charge.
No, that's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah, so I went a little hot on the 4-up invulns. He went a little down on his, hitting and wounding, and he didn't have them as the O's target. And Canis Rex got a free heroic intervention into the Impulsor. So on his turn, I scooped the Impulsor, and I think 1 Subductor did like a damage to a Sword Brethren guy.
Did he charge the Impulsor too?
Yeah, he charged the Impulsor first to eat the heroic intervention from Canis because there was no
Gotcha.
way for him to charge the Subductors without getting heroically intervened.
Okay.
So he decided to give me the Impulsor and not give me the
Sword
Sword
burst.
Brethren, which obviously you don't want to lose the Sword Brethren on your own turn.
Right. Yeah.
So he hit the Subductors, didn't kill them. I also rapid ingressed into his deployment zone turn 1 with one of the or not turn 1, turn 2 with the Navy Breacher squad with the Rogue Trader entourage. And yeah, and then so on my turn, I moved up with the Rogue Trader entourage unit, and they picked up the Gladiator Lancer that was on his home field objective. Granted, I got a little lucky on my rolls. The Meltagun did 7 damage by itself, and then the Household Pistol from the Rogue Trader got a 6 on the dev wound, and then handed
Wow.
him 2 other saves at AP3 ignores cover. So between just those 2 guns, I did 13 damage to the Lancer, and I didn't even have to shoot the rest of my weapons. And then I have 14 bodies that are OC2 or 1 apiece, just sitting on his home field objective on Scorched Earth on turn 2.
Yikes.
So he only had his 1 natural expansion objective, and I held his home field for the rest of the game.
Incredible.
And then I picked up. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, and then I would think that at that point the game pretty much just snowballs, like with table
Yeah, and
presence
that
and points.
exactly, and that's kind of just what happened from there. On my turn 2, I picked up that Gladiator Lancer. I picked up all of his Inceptors, and I picked up the Sword Brethren unit and the Emperor's Champion that was with them, and the Impulsor was already dead on his turn.
Wow.
And so now I'm holding most of the objectives. He kind of still staged over on the other side of the table with the Land Raider with the Eradicator brick inside. And then I pass turn to him, and he, takes his Repulsor Executioner and the Land Raider. He moves around, still keeps the Eradicator brick inside because he wasn't close enough to go hit Canis or anything else, but put them in an aggressive position where the next turn he might be able to get there. And then he sent the Repulsor Executioner back into his deployment zone to try and kick the Navy Breachers off of it.
Right.
Unfortunately, the Repulsor Executioner doesn't really like shooting at the Navy Breachers when they pop smoke, and
Oh
minus
no.
-1 to hit and cover. So he shot the entire payload from the Repulsor Executioner into them and killed 2 models. And then I rezzed both of them back on my turn. So it took him, I think the Repulsor Executioner spent the rest of the game, or spent turns 3 and 4 fighting them in his deployment zone, and then on turn 5 he went to move it out, and I overwatched and killed it with an Inquisitor. But so
Wow.
he lost a lot of value from the Repulsor Executioner. And yeah, on my turn 3, I still was holding the majority of the objectives, and I brought my Deathwatch veterans out, and I scooped up his other Sword Brethren squad. I picked up the Land Raider, and I picked up the what else? I can't remember. I think I just did some damage to the Repulsor Executioner,
Right.
and took out a guy from the Eradicator brick. So then he shoots me back. He does a little damage to my Deathwatch veteran squad. He left 2 hammers and the Watchmaster in the squad, and he picked up some of my Navy Breachers with Kyria Draxus. And then on my turn, I think I basically just tabled him from there. He had bottom of 4. I think all he had left on the table was the unit of scouts that was
Yikes.
left.
The scouts were the last. That's
Yeah, the
incredible.
scouts were last. They lived through the end of the game. I never got to them, but I was on all the objectives for most of the game,
Dang.
and I just got good secondaries that lined up with all of my turns, and I was just able to convert all that damage and
Just get him.
basically ended up tabling him. Yeah.
So before we move on, I want to touch on so it took you a long time to actually kill the repulsor, right? But
It did, yes.
But if you think about it in this way, you putting something in his backfield to make his repulsor turn around is
Exactly.
basically killing it 2 turns early. If he
Exactly, yeah.
if he has to commit something, like, because it's not probably his best unit in the army list, but that's a very
No,
valuable unit in his list, and for him to have to turn around and try to take out,
absolutely.
arguably not as efficient as a unit. Well, I don't know. Navy breachers are pretty strong, but
Yeah,
in the same way, having to do something like that, I think really allows you to set the tempo of the game. So that's sweet. Good job on a
absolutely. Yeah.
round 2 win. Let's head it into
Yes.
round 3.
Yeah, so round 3 started the next day. I was feeling good. I got my 100-point win. I was like, okay, I'm feeling good. Hopefully, I don't pull another matchup that can kind of just stat check me off the board like the guard. And then I look and I'm like, great.
Necrons.
I'm playing against Necrons with 2 Catan and a Wraith brick. This is
Uh,
and a warrior brick. I was like,
dude, that's
this
stat
is
check city, man.
yeah, not ideal. Not ideal. Um so this is taken hold is this mission. I think I won because this is my best mission. Mission A, taken hold with banners. I have so much battle line.
Right.
I ended up getting all 5 banners by the end of the game.
Wow.
Um,
I always forget to take my home objective for banners.
yeah, it's funny. It's basically like I don't even really have to think about it. I can accidentally get banners just because of how much battle line stuff I have on
Right.
the list. And that's what I ended up doing. So like I had a Navy breacher touching that one turn 1, and then over the course of the game ended up picking up the rest of them. But I went first here, and I went for a bit of an aggressive play. I picked the Eversor in this matchup, and this is probably the only time the Eversor really earned his weight. So the Eversor blitzed turn 1 and crashed into the Wraith brick and picked up the Technomancer.
Oh my
Um,
god, that is incredible.
Yes, so he loses stealth on the Wraith Brick, and he loses the 5-up Feel No Pain, and he loses the repair from the Canoptech Cloak. And normally he would just be able to, Awaken Dynasty, spend a CP, pick the Cryptech back up, the Technomancer, he stands back up after the Eversor kills him, and then I have to kill him again with something else. And that was my plan originally, was to, use the Eversor, and then again, like the Calidus or the precision from a character, something to go and scoop him. But my opponent has made a pretty critical mistake here. Overwatched the Eversor on turn 1 when I ran
Oh
in.
man.
Yeah, so he overwatched and didn't kill the Eversor, and so I got to just pick up the Technomancer for free. And it's like, okay, great. The Eversor died back in return, but I'm like, I got the Technomancer out of the squad, and that meant that unlike in the first round where his unit of Bulgrin was able to just collapse my top objective there, the Wraiths weren't able to collapse it because they weren't durable enough anymore.
Yeah,
And then,
like a
you know,
they have 4 wounds, right?
yeah, and who has a 4 damage gun that's real efficient is one of my good friends, Canis
Yep,
Rex.
yep, yep. So like a
um,
5-up Feel No Pain is just so good. It's basically like
yes,
-1.5 damage sometimes.
yeah,
And so something like Canis Rex or like a damage 4 gun activating into a unit will sometimes it takes like 2.5 times for something to go through.
exactly. Especially get past the 4-up invulnerable save, and you
Yes.
have to hit and you have to wound, and it can be really difficult. Especially they had stealth from the enhancement from the Technomancers, so they were like really going to be a problem for me to deal with.
Yeah.
But yeah, because I was able to remove them turn 1, those Wraiths weren't able to collapse that objective, which meant I got to hold that objective every turn except maybe not turn 5. I might have missed it on turn 5 since I went first. I think he ended up collapsing it eventually. But then on the other side of the table, Kyria Draxus and her Goonies, as I like to call them, went out and picked up pretty much the entire Lichguard squad over 2 turns of shooting.
Wow.
Just by themselves. Kyria Draxus, every time she shot, would pick up like 6 of them by herself, and then, picked up like 6, and then another guy from the rest of the squad, or 2 guys from the rest of the squad. And then he'd res 1, and then the next turn, Kyria Draxus just aced the rest of the unit.
Nice.
Anti infantry 4 up with dev wounds is just with full rerolls to wound hitting on twos. She was just like scooping guys left and
Yeah,
right.
turns out that's pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty decent.
So a couple of things. First, can you tell us about keeping away from the Satan? Like what? Oh,
Yeah,
how were you managing to do that? Was it a lot of move blocking or just positioning?
so he played them pretty safe because he was worried about Canis coming out and stomping them.
Right.
So the Void Dragon stayed towards that bottom of objective for the entire game because I had Canis kind of in the middle towards that top objective. So the Void Dragon kind of played keep away over on that side and battled my trash over there for most of the game. And then the Nightbringer kind of started moving up, was still in his deployment zone turn one, and then changed and started coming back over the other way, back towards like the center objective. And because he only moved 6, it was just taking him too long to get there. So
Right.
the Nightbringer didn't make combat until turn 5.
Oh no. I'm sure
Yeah,
he
because
did
I
great
just
on turn 5, but it's
oh yeah, he picked up Canis Rex, like
yeah.
he did that. But I just every time I moved, especially starting on turn 3 when he had the Nightbringer in the middle of the table,
Uh-huh.
I said, okay, every unit in my army is going to go stand just over 18 inches away
Right.
from the Nightbringer. So it's
Yep.
like you're not going to have a declarable charge anywhere on the table.
And that's just
Um,
such a huge thing that I think a lot of people overlook. If it's just the
yeah.
melee armies, just take their movement plus 12
Yep.
and then stand zero
hmm
point 0.1 inches out of that, and then you're invincible.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
that's amazing. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that.
And then I used the Deathwatch veteran brick on turn 2. I slammed them into his warrior brick because I could contest them for OC since I'm OC 2 apiece on the Deathwatch
Right.
veterans. And he only had like 4 or 5 guys on the objective. So I was like, okay, I know I can take all 10 and hit them on the objective. And then I popped Epic Challenge on the Watchmaster and took Orican and um, the character out of the squad.
Oh
The
my
what was the other one?
gosh.
The Royal Warden. Yeah, so he went in, precisioned both of them out of the squad, and then I didn't kill the squad. And over 2 turns of reanimation, he got the entire squad back. Um, so he had the full 20-man left. But then on turn 4, he started making a play to go take my top objective with them.
Yeah.
And so I used Canis and one of the last unit of Navy or second to last unit of Navy Breachers, and I killed the whole squad since he had no character left and they were no longer within 6 inches of the reanimator. I was able to just kind of blitz through the squad.
Incredible. I love to
Yeah,
hear it.
so yes, and then the one other thing that I did this game that I was really proud of to deny his secret mission, which would have made it a much closer game. On turn, I had top of turn, so bottom of 4, he shot at the Imperial Navy Breacher squad with his Doomsday Arc, which is another game I rapid ingressed in his deployment zone and then sat on his home field objective most of the game with them. He shot at them, and I popped the 6-inch reactive move 4-up in Mullen stratagem, and they reactive moved towards the center of the table because I was looking at the what the secret missions could be, and I was pretty sure he took the hold 3 objectives in No Man's Land one.
Right.
So I reactive moved them 6 inches towards No Man's Land, and then on my turn moved 6 or rezzed a guy forward and then moved 6 inches, and I was able to charge his reanimator on the center objective and out OC it, and then he shot me with a couple things that could draw a line of sight. Right. And didn't kill enough of my unit, so I still held it at the bottom of his turn 5, so he didn't end up getting his secret mission.
I love that. Amazing. And
Yeah.
I think that just like highlights how good Pariah Nexus is, at least for me, with like plays like
Yes.
that being so important because of the secret mission
Exactly.
archetype. And it is very cool. Well,
Exactly.
good job.
And then
dude.
yeah. And he basically tabled me. Like he almost killed everything. I think I had a rhino and one character and a small handful of the Navy Breachers left, and that was it. And he had both Catan, he had a Doomsday Arc on full health, a Reanimator, he had Ceres, he had like the Overlord, so much stuff left on the table, but I was able to just keep his score down for long enough.
You just had dudes in the right place.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's look at round 4.
Yeah, round 4. So I was feeling real good. I'm like, okay, 2 wins in a row. Certainly, you know, I'll get table 1 this time. It'll lay out 1. It'll be good. And Linchpin is another one of my good missions. I look at my round 4 opponent. I'm like, great. Another stat check army. I'm playing against greater demons. Like, okay. So, but I came in the game, you know, I had a confidence and Imperial agents flowing through my veins. So we had a very good game. My opponent played very, very well and was able to deny me from pulling off my secret mission. The one thing that I missed on getting it was I had Artemis charge 2 plague bearers, and if he had picked up both of the plague bearers on like turn 4 when I charged them, then I would have had the opportunity to still do the secret mission. But because his battle line unit lived and they were out of his deployment zone, I wasn't going to be able to finish the secret mission. Yeah, so I had a unit ready to go into his deployment zone. And that would have been, you know, the 20 points on the secret mission.
Yeah, that stinks. It's so funny. We had 2 back-to-back games where like secret missions are incredibly, you know, relevant.
Exactly.
So was the big problem just like the demon profiles are just too tough? If he puts all of them in your face, you're not able to activate enough into them.
So that ended up being the problem. Bellicor stayed over again, did kind of what the Void Dragon did in the first game, stayed towards the bottom of the bottom objective there, and fought with the units that I sent that way to prevent me from kind of long-term holding that objective. And I had Canis Rex up towards the other side of the table, so I wasn't able to bring him over to deal with that. And then he had the Great Unclean One with the 4-up Feel No Pain in the center, and then Shalaxi and the Keeper running around the top side towards my top objective over here.
Yeah, and that's just too much.
Yeah, and it was so I know the army has the damage to make it happen because I killed the Great Unclean One in 1 turn from full to dead.
Wow.
It took my entire army, but I was able to pick him up with like a razor thin margin, you know, room left to spare. And the problem is on the turn after that, when I took my Deathwatch veteran squad and Canis Rex and hit his Keeper and Shalaxi, I just bounced super hard. He made all his 4-up invulns and made like the ones that he did fail, he made the Feel No Pains on the back end. So I like committed and then didn't kill anything. And then he kind of just started, you know, walking through what was left of my army at that point. And then Artemis failed to pick up the Plague Bearers. And, you know, so it just kind of a couple moments where if my damage had actually connected, I think I still definitely could have won the game. And I think there are definitely things I could have done better. But I had to also be really careful this game of screening because the Imperial Agents army doesn't have enough damage for me to be able to turn around and fight something in my deployment zone while also fighting the stuff that's stat checking me in front of me. So the Navigators were huge in this matchup because just the 2 of them kind of kept any of his greater demons from being able to fit in my the back of my deployment zone comfortably.
Yeah, that's sweet. All right, cool. Round 5,
Sisters. So finally, you know, an army that is not made of stat checking, you know, kind of stats. I was like, oh, this is great. You know, something that has some T3, I can, you know, it'll go well. And then I got to go second on Terraform, which is pretty good.
So and I have like 2 rules of thought with Terraform. The first one is if you are fast enough and you're faster than your opponent's army to tag every single objective and either force them to kill you or them just not to make it there, then that's really good. Or if you go second and you're able to play something that is just miserable for your opponent to activate into, then it can be tough too. But honestly, I've also had some really good success with going first on Terraform as well.
Yeah, and that it's a lot of times you can if you can like terraform 2 or 3 objectives turn 1 and like stop your opponent from being able to get back into you, it's huge. You know, you can kind of crush the game on the spot right there. But so my opponent did go first this game, and I left some things close enough for him to go into if he wanted to, but it would be like risky. And then also, put myself in good positions to hold the objectives. So he ended up pushing on turn one most of his army towards that bottom objective over there and didn't charge anything, but just kind of staged a little closer to it. And so then I took my subductors, and I think I left the middle with nothing on it because there wasn't much point in me going out for it. But I took subductors on either of the objectives on the top and bottom, and I started a terraform action on it. And so I passed the turn back to him. I got some secondary points, and I said, okay, now you have to come out. You have to spend something to go stop these subductors from terraforming. And if you don't, I'm just going to start racking up points super early. So he stopped the terraform on the bottom by sending in his 10 Zephyrim squad to go deal with them, and then also brought out an immolator with Melta Retributors, brought out a Rhino with some Battle Sisters. He brought out a ton of stuff on this turn, a Castigator, ton of stuff. So he picked up the one unit of subductors on the bottom and then ignored the unit up top. So I got to hold that objective still and terraform it on turn 2. Right. Or I got to complete the terraform so I could start scoring it on turn 2. And so he picked up the subductors, but that was all he killed was that unit of subductors. So on my clap back, I picked up all the multi-melter retributors. I picked up the Rhino that came out. I picked up all the Zephyrim and the attached character. And I picked up, I think, a Castigator.
Yeah.
Or an
that's
immolator.
Too much. Because sisters are still kind of like relatively elite, actually, right?
They are, yeah. The stuff is pretty expensive. And so I kind of was able to just, crack him in the jaw pretty hard on turn 2. And admittedly, his dice were pretty bad the entire game. He was failing 3-up saves at like 60% in some places, which was pretty tough.
That's the reverse. You should be making 60%.
Yeah, exactly.
But
it felt like he was rolling 5-ups.
Yikes. Would you say it kind of just snowballed from that point? He didn't have enough resources to activate.
Exactly. Right. And so then he came back. I was able to reactive move the Deathwatch veterans back into the Rhino when he shot them, so that they were safe again for the rest of his turn and wasn't able to kill them. He rapid ingressed the Volgons in on turn 2, but he rapided them in towards the top where all he could fight was my subductors. So they spent a turn fighting the subductors, and then with 20 Navy breachers shooting and fighting, I picked up all the Volgons and Vol.
Absolutely, yeah. Man.
And then from there it was just, Canis Rex got to live because he didn't have enough multi-meltas left to like kind of really guarantee his damage went through. So Canis Rex is picking up 2 tanks a turn. The Deathwatch veterans are, picking up something a turn, picking up the Seraphim when they came in from Deep Strike. Kyria Draxus and her Goonies are picking up a squad of Seraphim or something. So it just kind of ended up being this game where he like came out and didn't really do a ton of damage, and then I hit him back really hard, and then he like came back out to try and hit me back and didn't do enough damage because the things that he was able to hit weren't the things that I really cared about him hitting. And then I kind of just picked up everything else after that. So it was a pretty decisive win for me. And I think this is the type of army that Imperial agents can do extremely well into consistently, right, because they're not just going to be able to like, touch grass and run at me in a straight line.
Yes, awesome. Well, good job, round 5. Ready for round 6?
I am ready for round 6.
Absolutely. Oh,
or just kidding, round 5.
But yeah, I'm just going to take a second to talk about our channel and our stream, Wednesday Night Warhammer. We stream every Wednesday night, of course. I'm on there most of the time, but if I'm not, we got some really good pals with Mike and Zach. And right now, something I want to highlight just for you is we are giving away a World Eater Combat Patrol. All you have to do is join our Discord and head into the announcements, and you will have a chance to win a bunch of red angry men and then one dog-like thing.
now's your time. You've always wanted
Yes.
to start a World Eaters army. Here's
Yes.
your chance. It's
Here's your
free. It's free to
chance.
join the Discord and sign up.
Yeah, and we're actually developing a pretty good community in there. We're sharing art. We every single stream we've been sharing some of the community's art during the stream, and it's been really fun just to see everybody and what they're working on, and just see that community grow. And like the video you're watching right now, we're releasing tactics video every single week along with our amazing streams. We would love to have you hang out for just a little bit longer. But now, actual round 6 with Charlie. Here we are.
Actual round 6.
Imperial Knights.
Yeah, man, I couldn't catch a break on the stat checks for this one. So Imperial Knights coming in, I was like, I know this is going to be tough, especially on Take and Hold with hidden supplies, where scoring primary is so easy. Fighting against a stat check army can be especially brutal. Right. So, and to make matters worse, I went first in this game. So going second against Imperial Knights with Imperial agents on hidden supplies on layout 6, which was the layout I didn't want to play on. So it's another case of like, man, kind of hitting a nice trifecta of unfortunate circumstances.
Right.
So I knew coming into this, I was like, okay, the only way that I'm going to be able to pull this one off is I have to stop him from scoring primary. In a mission where it's really easy to score primary, I can't afford to let him get like more than a 10 early on.
Yeah.
And I have to be getting at least 10s or 15s for myself, every turn.
Which is honestly, hidden supplies is the one where there's you split the middle, right?
Yeah, so there's 6 objectives on the table.
Which is like, if you think about it, you just do your expansion objective, then the center one that split towards that expansion objective, and then your home.
Exactly.
And then you have a 15.
Exactly, yeah. But unfortunately, I'm also playing against Imperial Knights here. So Canis Rex is a problem. He had a Lancer, which is a problem, and because we're on Search and Destroy, we're so close together.
Yeah.
So the Lancer was real scary. So I had to use my subductors to kind of stop the Lancer from being able to get anywhere scary on turn 1. This is another thing. The navigators are huge. I have so much just like random units around the table that I was able to prevent his Mysterious Guardian from ever having a good spot to go up and land in his turn. So he never got to use it and just ended up keeping that guy on the table. And then I just ignored Canis Rex. So I just let Canis Rex have that top objective, but it took him, 3 turns to get there and take the objective from me. So I still got to hold it for turns 2 and 3.
Sweet.
Since I went first, so that worked out pretty well for me.
Cool.
Yeah. And then aside from that, I kept him to a 5 primary on turn 2. I kept him to a 10 on turn 3. I think he was able to get a 15 on turn 4. But I ended up, and I won the game on turn 5 with the Calexis. I sprinted Calexis into the middle of the 4 units he had left on the table on my top of 5. And at the start of his command phase, I said, okay, the Calexis is going to use the once per game ability, take a battle shock on all 4 of your knights that are left on the table. And he ended up failing 2 of those battle shocks. And it's like it's a mini Shadows of the Warp because it's at -1. And you can't auto pass it because it's at the start of the command phase. Right. So the 2 armigers that were rolling on 8s, they both failed. So now he can only hold 2 objectives regardless, because the knights there's only 2
right
from his army left on the table. And so I was able to win this one 83-80 because on bottom turn scoring for hidden supplies, he was only able to get that 10 primary.
And 83-80, that absolutely shows that had he made those battle shock, then that's a 5-point swing. And then
exactly. And then I lose, exactly. I lose 85-83.
Amazing. Love to hear it. And I love to hear the Calexis getting some love too.
Yes. And I after my experience this event, I think the Calexis is going to be in my list more often.
Perfect. Amazing. All right. round 7, which certainly isn't
Yeah,
Imperial
yeah.
Knights
So
again.
it can't. So certainly, my reward for beating Imperial Knights, can't be Imperial Knights again, can it? Oh,
Yes.
well, that turns out it is.
Yes.
So another situation of playing against Imperial Knights on the ritual on Crucible of Battle, which is a tough mission for me to be playing Imperial Knights on.
Right.
Um,
Which at my first glance, I used to think that, oh, ritual is not good for Imperial Knights or Knights in general, but it's
right.
actually very good for Knights
Hmm.
because they
It
actually
is
do have like multiple units that can just activate and do these objectives.
exactly,
And then the minimum they have is OC8, right? So, yikes.
exactly. Yeah,
They can take away your objectives and hold their objectives pretty dang strong.
yeah, exactly.
Um, and then
So
can are is one knight able to touch two objectives because of how big it is, or is it
yep,
just not? Oh,
yep, it is, and that did end up being something that happened in this game with the Atropos living to the end of the game. On turn 5, he was able to hold 2 objectives, and this is another game I also went first this game,
yeah,
which again, not ideal. Um, but this game was extremely close. I on turn 4, I had an out to win the game with Canis Rex rolled for an 8-inch rerollable charge into my opponent's Canis Rex, and if I made the charge, I would have won the game. Um, and I unfortunately missed that charge. But I also think then there were some things that could have happened to affect this. I had a unit of Voidsman that was about 6 inches out of position for future secondary draws. And I think it's round 7. I've played a ton of games, and I just wasn't thinking of those small efficiencies of like,
right.
oh, what secondaries could I get next turn? Could this unit of Voidsman be in a better spot? It just didn't occur to me, especially in a game that was this tight. Um,
Yeah,
so if they were 6 inches farther up, that would have given me a sabotage in his deployment zone on turn 4, or on turn 5, excuse me, which also would have been on turn 4, I could have recovered assets with 3 units and gotten a 6 on that, plus the 6 for, so, there were just a couple things that it would have shifted the points for.
right.
Um,
Come on, Charlie. How could you not
I
think
know,
of a
I know.
possible sabotage draw? Come on.
I couldn't have seen it coming. But again, my opponent played this game extremely well. He played very tight, um, and I had phenomenal games all weekend. All of my games
Nice.
were very fun. But yeah, this one was just unfortunately I made a couple of positioning mistakes that 20 hindsight is 2020. If I had recognized in the moment or thought about it in the moment, I could have made steps to prevent that. Or, if I had just gotten a little lucky and hit the 8-inch charge,
Right.
then I would have won the game. Yeah, I could have won the game that way, and I would have ended 5-2. Um,
But
but
4-3.
ended up happening, and yeah, 4-3. That was my goal going in, so I'm extremely happy. Um, yeah, I mean,
So you,
5-2 would have been awesome, but 4-3 pulling 5 really bad matchups that I didn't really want and still winning 2 of those games and almost winning that third one on round 7. Um, I'm very happy with how the list performed. I think that it exceeded my expectations for being able to play the game into bad matchups, which was really huge. I wasn't
right.
expecting to feel like I had that much agency in the matchups where I felt extremely unfavored. And I mean, in the games where I did feel like I was not being, disadvantaged just by the matchup itself. The army felt very strong.
Nice. That's really good to hear. But it also feels like one of those armies where it's like a honestly probably relatively low floor but high ceiling of skill.
Yeah,
Would you say?
absolutely. I
Which
would I would say absolutely.
which I think is incredibly rewarding because it allows you to play the game. Like no
Yes, yeah,
no hate to
exactly.
some of the matchups you had, but like when you're playing 5 greater demons or something crazy like that, or a bunch of knights, there's still a lot of skill involved, but honestly, it's can your opponent kill your stuff? And sometimes it's more of
Yeah,
that as opposed to can I beat my opponent, you know?
exactly. And that was one thing. It felt extremely rewarding to play. Every single one of my games, I was like, man, like I didn't get to win this game because my army was better or because they just, didn't have the answers to deal with me. Like I feel like I earned all of my wins that I
Right.
got.
Amazing.
By like playing the game well. And then one thing that I will say that was definitely became clear to me looking back on the event and thinking about, how my rounds went. The army doesn't give you the opportunity to like take time off mentally during any of your games. Even
Yeah.
the games where I was like winning really hard, if I had just kind of started to zone out and like do whatever and started making like mistakes because I was like, oh, I'm so far ahead, I easily could have just lost those games just because of a few minor mistakes, trading inefficiently in a couple places, get opening up my opponent to a good charge on something that I wasn't expecting, So I constantly had to be cognizant of like, okay, where can my opponent be? What can they be doing on their turns? What do I have to do to minimize what they can be doing on their turns? How do I make the most efficient, safe decisions? And then again, that's even in the games where I felt like I was very far ahead. I feel like I wasn't able to like take a break to mentally just take time off,
And
which
that's
didn't mean that.
tough at a 7
Yeah,
game event.
exactly. Yeah, and I think that also probably is a contributing to the reason I missed some of those positioning errors on my game 7 in the Knights is because we're on round 7 and I've been not able to like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm just winning this matchup so I can kind of just push stuff around the board. Um, so the army is very very mentally involved for all of your games. But I think they're genuinely much stronger than people give them credit for. The damage is significantly higher than people give them credit for, even
Right.
outside of Canis Rex. Like again, the fact that I was able to pick up the Great Unclean One with the 4-up Feel No Pain, who's arguably probably the most durable unit in the game.
Yes.
Um, and that's without Canis Rex charging him. That's, you know, Canis's gun, I think, did like 3 damage or something, and then the rest of my army did the rest of his wounds.
That's incredible.
Um,
Yeah, I feel like we just kind of glossed over that when you said that, but I was
yeah,
like, "What?"
yeah, yeah.
Um,
So
so
it took everything, but it happened.
it this still did happen. Yeah, and that's awesome. And like before we close out, what are you thinking of any changes or like an MVP that you had for this list?
Yeah. So the MVP, I think for sure was the Navy Breachers. Um, I, they're not like, wow, this unit is so broken. Oh my gosh, they just did everything that I needed this army to be doing in all of my games. So like the unit that I put in Deep Strike that I was able to rapid ingress with the Rogue Trader entourage, they were like something my opponent had to be screening. There's still a lot of OC, and then in 3 out of 4 of my matchups, I want to say I got to rapid ingress into my opponent's deployment zone and take their home field objective.
Wow.
Um, and they're like reasonably difficult to kill. You have some random 4-up invulns lingered in the squad. You pop smoke, you reactive move and give everybody a 4-up invuln. They do that. They have OC2 base, which means they go up to OC3 if you pick the objective for the Imperialis fleet. And they give the attached characters the full rerolls to wound, which Kyria Draxus loves having full rerolls to wound on all of her guns. And the basic Inquisitor loves having full rerolls to wound on his guns because he has some like randomly good dev wound flamer and then a combi weapon. And he's, I think, probably the only combi weapon in the game that hits on, which is pretty funny. Just, basic Inquisitor shoots better than your average Space Marine.
I'm here for it, man.
Yes. So yeah, MVP, Navy Breachers. The list wouldn't function without them. They do a lot of the legwork in keeping the matchups dynamic and making sure that I can play the game, score secondaries, put pressure on my opponent, do damage where they don't expect. And then as far as changes, I think the only thing for sure that I would change in my list is the second unit of Voidsmen would drop out and become an Inquisitorial Henchman squad. They're the same points, 50 for 50s, but the second Voidsman squad was always in strat reserves. So that the 6 Navy Breacher, or not Navy Breachers, the 6 Inquisitorial Henchmen have the same footprint as the Voidsman squad. So they could have fit in all of the same places that the Voidsmen fit, but they come with like a random multi-melta instead of whatever the rest of the guns were in the unit. And so like I would have only gotten to fire that multi-melta like 2 or 3 times, right? But it's an extra multi-melta that I didn't have. So it's like, it's like a small thing that doesn't really dramatically alter the way the list functions. But like sometimes your multi-melta hits and wounds and kills something. You know what I mean? So it's like just having that option in the list, I think would have been nice. It would have given me some opportunities to do funny things in some of my games, but 95% of the time they would just be there to do an action or sit there to be somewhere doing a thing,
and then
like
probably die.
Yeah. And then it's funny actually. I think I only lost 1 unit of Voidsman throughout the entire event. Even in the games where I was practically getting tabled, people just never had the bandwidth to like turn and go deal with them because I just had so many units on the table. It was like there's always things that are worth dealing with before going to deal with these guys that are at like the corners of the table.
Yes, I can imagine. Awesome, man. Well, Charlie, thanks so much. Congrats on your success with an army that
Thank you.
I feel like a lot of people have written off. But I think it is very cool to see that you're doing so well in these tournaments, and a huge tournament too.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to hear, I was excited to hear just how you use the list and how well it performed. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very excited. I think the next event I'm going to is probably in January up in Valdosta.
Sweet. I'll try to go to
I'm
that
not
one
sure.
too. Let's go together.
Yeah, let's do it. We'll get out there together. But yeah, I'm definitely going to be bringing the Imperial agents. They're and huge shout out to my wife. She helped me get everything battle ready in like 6 days. So
Wow.
I started painting the Saturday before Crucible.
Yeah.
I had everything fully painted and based by Thursday. So
Oh
it,
my
it was
God.
just all my free time went to it. And I'm actually pretty happy with how everything turned out.
That's
But
amazing.
yeah.
All right, Charlie. Well, thanks for stopping by, and thanks everybody for listening. If you
Yeah.
liked this video, if you liked hearing how cool Charlie is, comment, like, subscribe. Thanks again, Charlie, and I'll see you everybody Wednesday.